about.
Mm, gotcha. Okay, that's good to hear. What's up, Michael Grazzi? How are you? All right, cool. All right, let's start. So I wanted to give a class about Yom HaZikaron, and spend a little time thinking about Israel and having a conversation about it. And I thought that a good place to start was to read a book on the subject, which I'm trying to do now. And like I always tell you guys, I'm appreciative that I have the opportunity to give the class just because I get to read a book or something to prepare for it. So I would definitely recommend to all of you, if there's anything you could even teach ever, it'll give you a chance to get, more mastery. And I know all of you have mastery in certain fields, and a lot of you have tried teaching also. So that's cool. And then you'll know the feeling. But anyway, so I've been reading this book. I asked Rabbi Ricky which book I should read, and he told me The Prime Minister, which is this massive book. And I read the first chapter, which was a fun chapter. And basically what I'm going to do is we're going to read through it together. And we'll just think about it in our modern mind. So the book is a book written by Yehuda Avner. He was a member of the government for multiple prime ministers: Levi Eshkol, Golda Meir, Yitzhak Rabin, Menachem Begin. So he was constantly in the government, and he got to work very, very closely with Israeli leadership, which I think is pretty cool. And so he has a very firsthand knowledge of them and all the different things that go on with them. So that's cool. So we're just going to read, and then we'll analyze and we'll discuss, and we'll think about it in a modern head. And we're going to read mostly about Begin now, a young Menachem Begin. So I think, he's probably 20s or something like that, and he's already in a crazy leadership role in the beginning. So we could just start from the beginning. Does someone want to read? And then we'll... Yes, no? Should I read?
If you want me to read, I can read, but you could read.
Mia, you could read. Go ahead.
The first time the name Begin struck a massively resounding chord in my mind was on a sultry August afternoon in 1947, while walking down a street in the heart of Jewish Manchester.
So the author's from Manchester, in England. Go ahead.
There, daubed in blood red paint on a synagogue wall, was a splash of raw and angry graffiti. "Hang the Jew, terrorists begin."
Begin. Menachem Begin. He's the character.
Oh, I keep saying that.
So hey, that's the first thing he says. Good. Go ahead.
Though mere school led at the time, albeit close to graduation, I knew enough to know that Menachem Begin was the arch find of the British in Palestine. There was a price on his head, and they wanted him, dead or alive. For almost 3 years, he had pitted his ragtag secret army, the Irgun Zve Leumi, the National Army Organization, commonly called the Etzel or the Irgun, against British might, in a ferocious rebellion, the aim of which was to drive them out of the country. It was a deadly underground combat which Begin called a fight for freedom and which the British called terrorism.
So first, just setting a little background, right? The author is in England, okay, and that's going to be relevant, right? Because who was the Israeli government Begin fighting against? Did we see? The British, right? Fighting against the British. So Begin's this leader of this rebel army, rebel Jewish army. He's this young Jewish guy. I keep picturing myself when I hear his name. I could be the rebel army, and he's leading this rebellion against the British. Jill says she's still thinking about the title of the chapter, In the Beginning. Yeah. Okay. That's profound. Jill, you want to tell us why, or just you want to leave it at that? Probably you want to leave it at that. Okay. Shoot, I did something weird with my chat. Now it's hidden behind this thing. All right. Whatever it is. Okay, cool. I'm going to read. Ever since the early 1920s, Britain held a mandate from the League of Nations to govern Palestine with the aim of initiating a Jewish national home there, as promised in the famous Balfour Declaration in 1917. So 1917, we learned this in school, right? Balfour Declaration that says Jewish homeland in Palestine. Very exciting. But to all intents and purposes, Palestine had been turned into a possession of the British Empire. And almost from the start, Arab enmity, what does enmity mean? Hatred, Arab hatred, had swelled and grown in proportion to the influx of Jewish immigrants. As Jewish immigrants go up, so does Arab hatred. So Jews get to establish a homeland, Jews start moving in, Jews' proportion goes up, Arab hatred goes up. Okay. As the seeds of strife became even more bitter, London engaged in ever more convoluted exercises to appease the parties and interests. So the British are doing the best they can with the Jews who think that it belongs to them, the Arabs who think it belongs to them. It was promised to the Jews to have a homeland there, and so on. Okay, cool. So now he gives a little backdrop of what was happening in his personal life, right? The Holocaust going on, right? World War II, and the scenes of the heaps of Jewish corpses and the piles of bones of the cremated and the dead-eyed death camp survivors, too frail to survive, and inflicting my soul with a sense of helplessness, horror, frustration, bewilderment, right? The Holocaust clawed at his innards. And hardly had the flames of Hitler's final solution been doused, so it's just ending, before newsreels were showing the British Navy intercepting leaking boats of Jewish survivors off the shores of Palestine and turning them back or interning them. Some of the pitiful vessels searching in vain for safe harbor went down with their cargo. So what's going on? The war is ending, the Holocaust. Jews are angry. They're trying to go to this place that was promised in the Balfour Declaration to be a Jewish place, but it's ruled by the British. And what's happening? The ships are getting turned around, and they're seeing this on the news, right? Was it any wonder then that a deep buried fury burned within the Zionist circle of Manchester? And was it any wonder that a man of the stuff of Menachem Begin, driven by this inexpressible anguish, burst forth and with more audacity than armory led this small but well-entrenched Irgun underground army and a perilous resistance against the British in Palestine? So do we have the backdrop, basically? Everyone good with the backdrop? Any questions? No? Any thoughts just on the beginning? No. Okay. Fine. So this is now we're in a scene in like he's in London, and so they have events to get the pro-Begin people excited, and so he's going to one of them, and they're reading from this Begin propaganda sheet, and this is what it says: freedom does not descend like manna from heaven. It has to be won by trampling enemies and advancing through the wilderness to past bondage into blessings of future liberty. Menachem Begin is leading his people on that arduous and treacherous trek away from the wastelands of exile. He is guiding the nation through the tempest of time. Stern and threatening though the storm clouds might be, by dint of infinite resolve, steel courage, and boundless sacrifice, he is ascending to the sunlit highlands of Jewish honor, of Jewish freedom, of Jewish justice, the land where Jewish history began. So we're getting a little glimpse into the propaganda. That was the flyer that they handed out. Definitely more sophisticated in its language than a flyer that you put out now. Now I put out a flyer for the class. It's 90% pictures. I still don't get the impression that the few words I included on it are read. But their flyer, nice. I don't know who gave me that laugh, but I appreciate it. I should get like a soundtrack on here. You guys wouldn't even know. Anytime I want, just feed in the laughter. Like right now, just hit a button every time I want it. Okay, cool. So this is their propaganda, and you see, it's like biblical language, right? That freedom doesn't descend like manna from heaven. You want to be free? It's not. It doesn't just come down from God. It has to be won by trampling the enemies and advancing through the wilderness into liberty. Wow, so beautiful. This like reads like the American Revolution, right? And it's exciting. You know, part of this day, Yom Ha'atzmaut, right, is this exciting day that we have of celebrating a victory, a military victory, right? And we don't get to cheer much for militaries, especially these days in this liberal culture. You know, ben folo becha al tismach, we have that back in the day, but you know, you're not going to celebrate war. But then we'll watch the movie, you know, James Bond or whoever we want to watch, and we'll cheer for the violence. It just can't be real. But this is a story, and this is the day we have to celebrate. And I think the whole time we're going to have some questions about the morals, but also just a general sense of pride in our nation and our heritage and in this hero, Menachem Begin, that we're going to hear about, and some of the sacrifices he makes early in his life. We're not even going to touch the tip of the iceberg. I hope also that this will just excite you to want to learn more history as it has me. So, and as reported, I'm on the red now, Greenberg then went on to talk about the man whom Begin would forever describe as his master and teacher. Oh, this is the guy, like, I don't really empathize with Begin as much. Zev Jabotinsky, the brilliant linguist, author, essayist, poet, and philosopher. That should go like on my website. I'm just going to grab those. Who had established his own independent movement of revisionist Zionism. So this is this artist, almost like a rabbi, right? A philosopher, an artist, a poet who is Begin's main teacher and who actually helped rile up this movement. So that's really cool. I love that. And I want to read everything that Jabotinsky wrote now. I got so excited from him. Jabotinsky's revisionist Zionism, said Greenberg, is simple, direct, and candid, yet sophisticated in practice. It calls for the immediate establishment of a Jewish state. Its ideology emerged out of exasperation and disillusionment. Exasperation, fed up. Disillusionment, also fed up with the established socialist-dominated Zionist leadership's faint-hearted policies of abandonment, compromise, and indecisiveness, not to speak of excessive reliance on the British. It sounds like today, right? So why do they need this? Because the socialist-dominated Zionist government is just too buddy-buddy with the British. They're not demanding enough. They're not fighting. They're just letting things be. And you have this debate till today with Israel, right, about what the proper path is and how much do we need America now, right? And at that time, it was British that was the power player. Not to speak on excessive reliance on the British. Dr. Chaim Weizmann and Mr. David Ben-Gurion practiced this in the 20s and the 30s, and they practice it now in the 40s. Ben-Gurion is going to be also a key figure in this story, right? Here I understood and learned more and grew more involved in the following struggle in Palestine. Right column now, top, third line. Lay the key to the Menachem Begin's unreserved defiance of David Ben-Gurion, titular head of the Jewish government in waiting in Palestine, and chief strategist of its mainstream underground fighting force, the Haganah. So you have this guy, Ben-Gurion, who runs the Haganah. He's a rival, political rival of Begin, right? And because Ben-Gurion is working with the British, right? And we'll see that, and Begin is a little bit more of the wild card, right? And while in the turbulent landscape of Palestinian Jewish politics, Begin and Ben-Gurion, two breathtakingly courageous leaders, were intense ideological rivals, one left-wing and the other right. At this junction in time, there's a lot more dividing them than dueling political philosophies. They wrangled bitterly over the contentious issues of when best to launch the final showdown against the British to drive them out of the country. Ben-Gurion was intensely pragmatic. That means, practical. He didn't waste his energies on what he deemed to be crusades. As long as the Second World War lasted, I don't know if we have to get into this bit of strategy, but that talks a little bit about, the debate that they were having and if they should wait, if they shouldn't wait. But you have these two young Jewish leaders, I think Ben-Gurion older, but who are these crusaders in this fight, and we're gonna see more about them. It should be excited. How's everyone? Where's everyone at? Could I get some comments? Anything here?
Very good.
Very good. Thank you, Jill. You moved past the introduction in the beginning.
I'm still thinking about it.
He's still pondering that. Listen.
Could you remind me what you just said in the last paragraph?
Yes. So we got introduced to Menachem Begin, right? And now we just got introduced to his political rival, David Ben-Gurion, who is the one who wants to work with the British almost, right?
Oh, my whole thought was that they were on the same team forever.
So, right, they both are the Israeli government, but at this early stage especially, they're rivals, and it looks like probably later on, I didn't get past the first chapter or the beginning, so that's why, but we'll hopefully be, this is year one, so hopefully as we grow in age, we will grow in knowledge as well. We haven't had as much time to read as our parents and whatnot. Okay, cool. So anything else? Any other questions, comments? No? Should I ask you a question? No. All right, we'll continue. We'll get to the questions at the end. Decades later, I would look at Menachem Begin. I'm on the pink on the bottom left. Prime Minister of Israel, searching for a likeness to the fugitive with a price on his head, but could find none. So he's looking to see we could read this quote a little bit. It's kind of nice. We'll read the yellow. Our people are at war with this British regime, war to the end. Our fighting youth will not be deterred by sacrifice, torment, blood, and suffering. They will never surrender, nor shall they rest until our days of old are restored, and until our homeland, freedom, sustenance, and justice have been secured. This then is our demand. Immediate transfer of power to the provisional Jewish government. We shall fight. Every Jew in the homeland shall fight. The God of Israel, the Lord of hosts, is with us. There shall be no retreat, freedom or death. It's wild, right? How does it make you feel? Do you guys think you would do you understand the reason why there's a sense of urgency here, I guess? Do you
They've
feel
nowhere
like
to go.
They have nowhere to go. True. Well, they're in Israel, but yeah, some Jews that are outside of Israel have nowhere to go. True. We just saw the holiday.
Boats of Jews coming to Israel are streaming with Jews that have nowhere to go. Menachem Begin wants them to come into Israel, and the forces controlling Israel won't let them in.
Yeah, right. That's a tough image, right?
So
for sure.
It's life and death for his fellow Jews.
Life and death. True. We just had the Holocaust, right? So if there was ever a time where it was burningly clear that the enemy doesn't care about you, right, and that the enemy is not going to protect you, the enemy is as ruthless as could possibly be, it would be this moment, right? And you sometimes forget that. I think we probably forget that, right? We don't spend much time thinking about the enemy. The enemy for me is like the other test prep company. You know, he's not much of an enemy. There's real enemies, and we don't. There's something about being put in contact with them that kinds of it sets a stage for a certain heroism. As I was reading this book, and I put that on the flyer, the word heroism kept coming to mind, right? Here's this guy, you're going to read about him. What a hero. What a hero. You know, he's risking his life. He's taking chances. He's living on the edge. And us, the situation doesn't demand that type of heroism, really, for us. Now we got a little taste of some challenge, right, where we could be heroic. And, you know, you see, it still hasn't really roused us from our slumber. But history gets to points where there's real heroism that's needed. You know, you think now, like we always read about heroes, the hero who goes to fight. You know, Begin's the hero. But if you told your parents you were going to fight, they'd reprimand you immediately. They would tell you that you should probably stop and that this was an ill-suited idea, ill-conceived idea. So it's nice to see a moment that really does demand heroism, and we'll read more about him. So decades later, I look at Menachem. Yes.
How did they develop a whole army when they were ran by the Palestinians?
So we're going to see they're ran by the British, but they only have 1,000 men right now, this ragtag group, and most of them are undercover, regular civilians. They were able to outsmart the British really more than outgun them. And we'll see that. It's really the David and Goliath kind of story, which is really cool. Okay. So decades later, I look at Menachem Begin, the prime minister of Israel, searching for a likeness to the fugitive with a price on his head, but could find none. So he doesn't look like, he's looking at the older Begin and saying, oh, this is a nut, this guy, right? When he was young, he was crazy. And he doesn't see anything like that, nor could I discern any similarity between the hardened and unyielding Irgun underground commander, that's Begin, right? And the statesman I would come to know, very professional, buttoned up. And as for his older Irgun comrades in arms, I quickly discovered that they were, by and large, an amiable lot, friendly group, full of good cheer, public spirit, nothing like the terrorist gang their antagonist had portrayed them to be. Always a grand, I don't even know that word, recantor. In later years, I heard Menachem Begin relate to his veterans how much time he spent conjuring up ways to outwit the British, right? That's what we're saying, Sam, that he outfoxed them. As an example, he reminded them of how Irgun Youngstood had defied the British ban against blowing the shofar at the Western Wall on Yom Kippur. So this story is a fun story. The Jews were blowing the shofar at the Western Wall on Yom Kippur at the end, Ne'ilah, they're doing the Teruah Gedolah, right, at the end of the ceremony. Arabs are getting riled up, start getting into fights, yelling Allah Akbar, chasing. The British, this is a headache. Please, just stop blowing the horn at the wall. Don't blow the horn at the wall, right? So they tell them, you can't blow the horn at the wall. They don't. The next year, a guy still blows the horn. The British grab him, beat him up, the whole thing. So Begin starts getting fed up. He says, this is not right. This is our kotel. So he instructed his Irgun pamphleteers. So he had a group that would put out the pamphlets all over the city, his social media marketing team. Post stickers and let it be known that any British policeman disturbing services at the Western Wall will be regarded as a criminal and be punished accordingly. He just makes bold threats, right? Any British As the Day of Atonement drew nearer, his warnings grew increasingly more strident, generating ever more grisly rumors as to what punishment they would mete out on the British policemen. Criminal lunacy, cried the left-wing Hebrew press, the media, right, the liberal media, fearful of innocent casualties at the wall. The blowing of the ram's horn at the close of the fast is a mere custom, not an obligatory act, declared the tremulous rabbinate. Right, the rabbis are shaking. They say, this is not mandatory. You don't have to blow the shofar. And British intelligence speculated as to what casualties their police might sustain if fired upon. So it gets to Ne'ilah, and the Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Amonai Elohim Amonai, Hu Elohim. Amonai Elohim Amonai, right? And then they blow the shofar, and the soldiers are there, and they walk away. They leave. They got a command that they shouldn't engage, they shouldn't fight. And so they're going without fighting. He didn't have to actually spill any blood, just with a boast. And he later said he had no retaliation plan. He would retaliate elsewhere, but they wouldn't be shooting at the wall, right? The British were worried, obviously, that if shooting broke out at the wall, but he wasn't going to shoot at the wall. That would be reckless, or maybe that's just what he claims. But so then the following day, he wrote in the Irgun underground paper, which is also epic. They have the underground newspaper. Our ancient stones are not silent. They speak of the house that once stood here, of kings who once knelt here in prayer, of prophets and seers who declaimed their message here, of heroes who fell here dying. How great a flame, at once destructive, was kindled here. This house and this land with its prophets and kings and fighters were ours long before the British were ever a nation. Very cool. Very cool. So, again, for those that just joined us, I see a few did. We are reading a book written by a close advisor of Menachem Begin, talking about his life, and we're talking about his early years. We see him leading a revolt against the British occupancy in Palestine, trying to fight for freedom, and we're considering his heroism and what it means that we think he is heroic. What it says about us and our lives and our current status, and also trying to whet our appetite for history and get us excited about the possibility of learning more. Good. So this is now talking about how he had to hide from one place to another. With a flicker of a smile, he would recount how he had first commanded his Irgun fighters from a little rented room in a small seafront Tel Aviv hotel called the Savoy, adopting the pseudonym Ben Ze'ev after his father. He banked on the assumption that the last place the British would expect them to find him was under their very noses at a public hotel. For a while, he was right, but then he almost got caught. He moved somewhere else to the Hasidov corridor near Petach Tikva. He was Yisrael Halperin there, and assumed the guise of a refugee law student heavily laden with books, preparing for his bar exam. So now he's legit undercover. He's carrying his law books around as Yisrael Halperin. It's very funny. So how well I remember, so he's talking about his time there, the Shtibel, the homey, intimate little synagogue I used to pray on Shabbat and festivals. I once heard him say, on the first Shabbat, they honored me as befits a newcomer by calling me up to the reading of the Torah. They gave him an aliyah on the first day. The good Gabbai asked me my full Hebrew name, as is customary, but believe it or not, he said, I stumbled over it. The man gave me a suspicious stare. What's your name? He asked me again. And I had to remember not to give him my real name, but my Irgun name, not Menachem, but Yisrael ben Zevdav. After that, I was called to the Torah by that name. Like, this is the guy, he's commanding the Irgun in hiding from a Tel Aviv hotel. Then he's going to shul every day, this guy, and saying that he's Yisrael ben Zevdav while leading the resistance. Just mind-boggling, really powerful stuff. I find it, it's such a, obviously he's on our team. So so heroic, right? And the truth probably is that there's heroes on both sides, unfortunately. That there's always the brave man who's stepping up. You'd always think that what he was doing was heroic, but when it's heroism in honor of justice or something like that, and we could talk more about that and flesh that out as we go and as we get deeper. So now he's there, and he almost gets caught. So now and now the left wing is starting to rat out people. So he moves. He finds a tiny. This time they found that. Now he moved again. Now he's with his wife and his one child. So this is also crazy. He has a wife he's bringing along on this crazy path. Really mind-boggling. I'm blown away by it. This time they found. I'm in the left column, like halfway through, the ideal hiding place. A tiny, dilapidated house. So he doesn't even bring her into a nice house, the poor woman. In a nondescript refuse-strewn, fly-infested, and smelly Tel Aviv side street called Yehoshua ben Nun. The reason for the flies and smells was that Begin's neighbors were the municipal abattoir on one side, and the dog. It's bad. It's a bad spot. Bottom line. There, he changed his identity once more, posing this time as Rev Yisrael Sassover, and there he is, Rev Yisrael, with his wife and his son. This guy is now a Rebbe, and this is really funny. And what a great little shul there was. I heard him reminisce, and he's talking about how everyone there thought he was a good for nothing. He was a Hazit case. They think this Rev Yisrael does nothing all day. They keep asking, Rev Yisrael, what do you do? So he tells one time, they come to him and they say, listen, Rev Yisrael, we need a minyan for mincha. So he goes, okay. So he goes to the house. There's an Irgun meeting happening in his house, and he tells them, guys, I think there's like a strike. He has to, like, I don't even know. He had to shout, what is it? Because of the cacophony of the dogs barking from the dog home. He said, so he tells them, I'll join mincha. I have to just tell my wife. So when he enters, the chief operations of the Irgun said, Menachem, thank God you're back. We have action in 2 hours. That military action in 2 hours, because they're expecting me for mincha. I must go. I won't be long. He has to keep his cover. So he goes to pray mincha. And on his way back after services, says, I have a mitzvah for you to perform, Rev Yisrael, the head rabbi of the shul tells him. So goes, what kind of, our butcher Rev David needs a favor. What kind of favor? He needs a kashrus license. He needs 2 edim. Come, please. We have to go to his house right now. So he says, he starts shifting. So he goes, you have a problem with Rev Yisrael? Rev Simcha asks. No, of course not. Begin, trying to pull himself together, knowing that there's an urgent operation going on in his house. So he goes, I know he's honest, but what? All you have to do is tell the Dayanim, and they'll believe you that he's good. He said, it's just what? So then he says, I'm sorry, I'm busy. So the guy tells him, busy with what? You don't do anything, Rev Yisrael. And he says, listen, I have important things. And the rabbi goes, oh, like, this guy is really just the worst, he hates him. And I was thinking, like, how we operate so much for approval in the short term. Imagine being in this, being willing to be humble enough to be in this place where they think you're the worst person in the world. And deep down that you're a hero, or that you're trying to be, and that you're trying to fight. So often you want to be rewarded immediately for your heroic acts. You want people to know, but did he get rewarded? There's these people yelling that he's the biggest criminal in the world, right? That he should be hung, the British are saying. The left wing doesn't like him. Even the people around him think he's this Hazit case, right? It's really a powerful amount of sacrifice. And then he talks about how the British, where did he talk about that? How the British, maybe we'll get to that soon. All right. So then it's estimated that at the height of the revolt, there were less than 1,000 members of the Irgun and only a few hundred capable of mounting operations at any one time. Hardly anybody had served full time. Almost all had their regular jobs. And then they talk about the blowing up of the King David Hotel. I don't know that much. Does anyone know anything about the bombing of the King David Hotel?
I think it was a big moment, like, for when the British fell. It was like a big victory for.
I could speak on that. The King David Hotel was the British headquarters. It was very heavily guarded, and this was like a big deal to even attempt such an operation. It would stab the British, in their heart. Obviously, it was opposed by Ben Gurion and all the Likud members of the more political people, as opposed to Irgun, who was more right wing and aggressive. So they had, I forgot where, but I heard that, like, someone's grandfather was the guy who actually. So they covered themselves as milkmen, coming into the building to deliver milk, and inside their cart was the bombs. And I think they put the bombs in the basement. And first before this whole operation, they sent a letter to the hotel saying, we're going to blow up the King David Hotel. Get out. Like, they sent a letter to all the citizens and to the British, because they don't want to kill citizens. And
the reason they blew up the hotel, just to add a layer of detail, but you're doing amazing, more detail than I even know. They apparently had gotten documents from a raid, the British, that would incriminate many Israeli politicians and allow them to sentence them to death. So they were trying to recover to destroy the files. So that's why they didn't want to kill the British. It was really
okay, yeah. So that's the underlying purpose. And then the milkmen went in and they blew up. They killed a bunch of people. Among them were civilians. And it was a very big deal. I think it put like Irgun on the map, and gave them a pedestal on I think gave them like a seat on the table to discuss.
Yeah, exactly. And even some of the other branches got involved with them on this operation because they wanted the files destroyed also. So it was the first time they were working with some kind of consensus. And again, like, you just think of how this is being carried out. You see us. I'm scared to walk in a neighborhood if it looks like it's not the safest place. I get shifty, right? And these guys are going in and blowing up the hotels and really just unbelievable stuff. And even after he blew up the hotel, look, not only the Jewish press was the British press, but the Jewish press, Hamishmar, said it was treason and murder. Haaretz called it a frightful blow to the hopes of the Jewish people. The Davar headline read, "Without cause, without atonement." And Ben Gurion, head of the Haganah, sought to distance himself, saying that the Irgun is the enemy of the Jewish people. It's really crazy, with no approval on either side, just to know and to take this kind of gamble. And then the fact that after he does this, he's not Robespierre, right, who kills everyone after and tries to take over, which is what they were convinced he was. But he ends up being a regular politician, able to compromise. And I'm excited to read the rest of the book, but I think that also makes it, even more glorious. And the British's response is this in yellow. And you can see why they had to go to war. "I'm determined that they should be punished and made aware of our feeling of contempt and disgust at their behavior. I am certain that if my reasons are explained to the troops, they will understand their duty and will punish the Jews in the manner this race dislikes the most, by hitting them in the pockets, which will demonstrate our disgust for them." So he tells the British troops not to shop at the Jewish stores anymore. And he knows that by hitting them in the pockets, that will be most impactful. He's probably right, but it just reads, you could see that this is why they didn't want the British continuing to rule them. And then at one point, this is crazy, when British troops encamped in the grounds behind his Tel Aviv hideaway, so they almost found him, he went into a tiny cubby hole and sat there for 3 days with with barely any food, water, and very little air. I can't even imagine that. He goes into the little hole, and he just lays there. We're going crazy. We're getting cabin fever from sitting in our beautiful homes for a few days. The guy's lying in a tiny nook in the wall for days at a time. Again, crazy, just mind-boggling. On the third day, by the end of the third day, he was faint with dehydration and lack of oxygen. Finally, on the fourth day, he clambered out, gasping for breath, and plunged his head in a basin full of cold water. Maybe it's some artistic license here for the author, but wild. And he just continues. They whip Jews, and he promises to whip British soldiers, and he promises a hanging for a hanging. The price will be paid in full. You have some wild quotes from him here. And then he really bullies the British out. Eventually, it just becomes too much for them to manage. And so they go. And then we have to deal with the Arab part of the equation, right? And that once the British are out, now it's the Jews versus the Arabs. And that's the next step in the story. But I just felt like this chapter alone got my imagination going in so many different directions, and definitely made me realize how little I know about our history and the history of Israel. And we can never know anything, is the reality, that we'll always have so much that we don't know. But just every bit that we do know is so exciting. And I was thinking a little bit just to talk about two things. the first thing that I want to talk about is, what do you guys think of the fact that he reads as so heroic? Or do any of you have a hard time with the fact that we are celebrating this day, even though, if it was the opposite way, maybe we would feel like that, why should we be able to celebrate? It's a war, it's bloody, anything like that. Have feelings like that, or what's our overall sentiment just hearing about this?
I feel like we're okay to celebrate it, but I did notice I guess like a correlation or like a similarity when you were saying that he was in a hole for 3 days and like trapped without food or water. That reminded me of Saddam Hussein, how like he was the head of a resistance, and he was, where we found him, he was also something like that, in a hole, huge long beard. And like, probably there are people in the world, I mean, I wouldn't agree with them, but they probably think that he's this crazy hero. And if they were to read his, exploits, they would think of him very similar.
Yeah.
This guy sounds pretty radical. And at the time, maybe people were secretly, cheering, but nobody was allowed to cheer. That he blew up a building. That's inexcusable. I feel like it sounds also a lot like terrorism.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That was the first thing. They accused him of being a terrorist. Yeah, who else? That was great. No, you guys.
I could speak.
Gabe, go ahead.
I could speak. I have a lot on Begin. He's my favorite character in history.
There you go.
And for the reason as follows. We learned just now that he's the terrorist pre-1948. He's the fanatic. He's the right-wing lunatic. You called him a terrorist, and there's obviously, means to back that up. But my favorite part about him is that he had the brilliance, and he was the first Israeli statesman to make peace with an Arab country. In 1979, he made peace with Egypt, and that was like the most unbelievable thing for the right-wing government after 30 plus years with the left in power. They thought like this guy was going to support the settlement movement and make Israel look bad in the media, but he was the first, and it came from a right-wing government. And I read this recently I forgot what book, because I read a million Zionist books, but it said that I'm not sure if Yitzhak Rabin was left or right. Do you know? Okay, but aside from him, most of the peace that came from Arabs were right wingers, and I think he said that it's because the citizens first only have the trust in the right-wing government to make peace with the Arabs, because they're the ones who are always advocating to fight with the Arabs, to bring terror and to be aggressive. And he said, and only they understand so much the importance of making peace. We could look at Ariel Sharon, who was one of the founders. First, he conquered and was a hero in the 73 war in 67, but he also was a big proponent of the settlement movement in Gaza. And then when he was prime minister in 2005, he made the hardest decision to pull out. So the guy who was, the proponent came to terms, and it was also, like a national agreement to pull out at that time in 2005. As much as we think, in hindsight, it was a mistake. But going back to Ben Gurion, he was the first Israeli statesman to make peace with the Arabs. And I think there's something to say. I meant Begin, sorry. And there's something to say that the right-wing extremists are also, the ones who the people have entrusted to make peace.
I love that. That's very, very cool. And Gabe, definitely we should go to your class next Yom Ha'atzmaut. I can't believe how well read you are on the subject. It's amazing. I got to read more. Yeah, cool. So I think he's not Saddam Hussein, because at a certain point he's the one making peace, right? And he's the one that's leading as a calm voice of reason, which is definitely interesting. What else do we have? Anyone else have thoughts? Want to contribute? Jill contributes the picture of herself at the beach. Okay, that was a fair contribution.
Oh my god, I'm so embarrassed. I was playing with the thing, but I could contribute if you need.
You have a more vocal contribution.
I think he sounds a little bit like a bad guy, but
You get rubbed the wrong way by him being willing to fight.
I'm so embarrassed. Let me shut this. I'm getting rubbed the wrong way.
You are.
It's too much. Use your
But
words.
He did use the words. He didn't. But he used words that threatened violence. It seems like, and violence. Yeah, it's hard to understand someone using violence. But again, we come back to the image of Jews being turned away from their homeland, Jews being persecuted, Jews that were just all burnt in the chambers, and the idea that I think if anyone knew what he did would work, everyone would have agreed with him. The question was just if it was a smart military strategy. They were all afraid that his little 1,000-person army was going to get them into trouble, right? I don't know that
and I truly can't speak on it because I really don't even know what I'm talking about, and I would never be able to make decisions like that. But
no, I don't know who would be able to. It seems like a challenging
probably Gabe.
thing. Gabe seems like he has the level-headedness to make the decisions. Nice. Who else has thoughts? Thank you for the contribution, though, Jill. Abraham, go ahead.
I keep thinking back to that scene with the cartel when Begin starts putting out those pamphlets and building this following behind this idea that if the shofar gets blown and the British police officers are going to start making trouble, that trouble's going to get worse. The weird thing comes when Begin doesn't believe that they should actually retaliate with violence, and yet for his whole thing to work, other people have to believe that they should. And so this is a different case than the left not liking him for his beliefs, because this is him trying to convince his own followers that something is the right thing to do when he thinks it's not the right thing to do. Seems very counterintuitive.
It's wild, right? He's playing a game of poker, and some of it involves convincing even his own people that he's crazier than. That's what some people see with Trump, right? They think that possibly he's trying to convince the Chinese that he's as insane as they think he is, and that it necessitates creating enemies on the left in order for the enemies to believe that he's as crazy as enough to come through.
It's just like the nuclear issue, right? I mean, you have to seem like the guy who might press the button for your button to do anything, but nobody wants to. How could you seem like the guy that people think, oh, maybe he's going to destroy the world? Is that what it takes to be a leader? To seem like you could do horrible things? And that way, it's almost impossible to seem like a good leader.
Love that. It's unreal. It's true. You have to seem like a leader who may press the button, because if not, then you might not as well have the button. And if you don't have the button and they have the button, then you're in a bad situation. So there's a good amount of political posturing. Yeah, a lot of political ingenuity also from this guy, which is unbelievable. The other thing that I have been struck with is seeing the world as this stage for heroism. I was reading a psychology book that was saying that the need to be heroic is at the core of the human drive and imagination, and that we all want to live a life of some sort of heroicism, I guess is the word. And seeing that, look, none of us want war, right? We don't want sickness now. We don't want pain. We don't want suffering. But all of these things present the opportunity, the stage for us to actually be heroic, the stage for us to be able to go to war, and the stage for us to be willing to risk our lives for something, and the stage for us to make crazy decisions with real drama and real tension. Like a movie without stakes, it's a boring movie, right? And a world without stakes would probably be a boring world. And so as we think about that, and we think about this idea of war, and we're struggling with it, we're challenged by it, we understand its importance, we're struck with the moral ambiguity, right? Because I think that's there also, right? Why are we any different than them? And maybe you'll say that we stand for different things. We don't want to kill them with self-defense, right? And probably a lot of that's true. And I think it's a very important question to ask yourself, though, right? And I think who Begin was, or who Israel is, depends very much on our actions, right? Who is the Jewish people, and not that Israel only has the right to exist, that we only have the right to have a state if we are perfect or anything like that, but if we want to stand for something more, and I think we all do, then we have to challenge ourselves and ask ourselves what we stand for, and we have to be convinced that no, this is for the good of the world, and we have to convince ourselves, convince others, and act the part. But having these opportunities to be heroic and having a day where you could celebrate your triumph, that you've seen in the movies, and having those role models, and that's, I think, a blessing in a certain way. And so even when hard things are going on, I think it's a good time to appreciate the opportunity that it presents for you to be heroic, to rise to the occasion, to take chances, and that's what I was struck most by. Yeah,
Question.
Abraham, go ahead.
Do you really
I
think
love it.
do you really think a world without stakes is better than a world with is worse than a world with stakes? It seems like a world without stakes is probably the best world.
Yeah, well, that's what it would seem, right? We were talking the other day, I think, at one of the classes about it. Alan Watts was talking something about that imagine that you were a god and you made the world and everything was very easy and it was perfect for you, and you'd say, oh, well, I wonder what it would be like if there was a little challenge, and so you'd nudge up the knob but drop, and you'd say, okay, that was fun. What if we nudge it up a little more and a little more and a little more, and we'd probably end up with, or possibly, or we could hypothesize that we would end up somewhere close to where we are now. I don't know if that's true or not. I always say if we're living in a simulation, then it's likely there's two options. Either we chose to be in the simulation or we were forced to be in the simulation. And if we chose to be in the simulation, it's likely that this is not our first simulation. We have tried out other simulations before this one, and then we're kind of choosing to be in the one with these stakes. And we always say video games. No one's playing the video game where you go party all day. You just stand in the grass and wave and you have all the stuff. You only play the game where you have limited resources and you have to kill the other guy or he gets you. So there's something here, and there's something exciting about it. It doesn't mean none of us are running in the street and killing people or sniping people down. It's not I don't think that that's in our nature, but to appreciate that the world gives us so many opportunities to strive for greatness and for goodness. And this was an opportunity that we didn't get, but these opportunities exist. And especially now, you just got to get yourself out, get going, and the world needs more heroes. Yes,
Mark, how you
Mr.
doing?
Abbott, how are you?
What's happening? Beautiful. First of all, thank you very much for the education here. Tremendous. Hazak Baruch.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming. Thank you.
I'm not too up to date on all the different factions and parties in the Israeli government today, but what would you say? What would you compare Begin to today's government as opposed to Ben Gurion? And secondly, where do you see religious extremism? Was it a factor there? Like, did they have a desire to go and take the Temple Mount for religious purposes, or was it more just for the to have a state?
I'm gonna defer to Gabe on A, if he's still here. His face is not here.
Okay.
Gabe, did you hear the question? You're muted.
Can you repeat the question?
Who would Begin compare to in today's Israeli government?
I don't really know much Israeli contemporary politics. Maybe
You stumped all of us, me and my class going experts.
Maybe I'm probably wrong about this, but I always had a feeling that Lieberman was like a extreme violent guy.
So not like Netanyahu. You wouldn't say he's Netanyahu.
No, Netanyahu he's a bit right wing, but he's also very political and strategic, and he teases the right wingers to like say, oh, we're gonna be more friendly in the West Bank, but like he knows damn well that if he does something stupid in the West Bank, America will quash him. So he's centrist, but also he's right wing, but also centrist.
Right, he's not as out there.
He's definitely not as aggressive.
All right, cool. So hopefully this got all you thinking. Hopefully, again, like I said, I'm starting to realize as I'm getting older that we get more years of our life. Like that's something that never struck me when I was younger, that we don't have to do everything in 1 year. So hopefully we'll be back to this story. We'll learn more about all these people. And hopefully by the time we're older, we'll be baki in Israel politics and history in general, all right? Thank you guys all for coming. I will see you next Tuesday night, hopefully, and some of you sooner. And I really, again, I appreciate so much spending this hour for me. It's unbelievable. Your support really means a lot to me, and I hope you gain as much as I do. So thanks, and have a great night.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Am Yisrael Chai.
Amen.
I love you.
Funny that